Hey, everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network, friends, colleagues, people that I admire, that I see that they're doing great things in social media or the work that they're doing. I want to know which books are the ones that have impacted them the most, left an impression on them, something that they maybe always draw value from. So in this series, I cover three types of books or three categories. The first being when they're housing or schooling me on a book that I haven't read. The second category where we're comparing notes on a book we've both read, whether specifically for the episode or that we've read in our previous lives before the series. And then the third category is an author or publisher when they want to come in and just share the value of the story of the book that they're putting out. In this particular episode, my guest is going to be Tia Hawkins. And Tia is a registered nurse, wellness coach, and educator, speaker, and author. Combining both education and life experiences, Tia has gained a social media presence for her wise quotes, relatable life stories, and transparent advice. Her words have been published online by some of the biggest parenting forums on social media today, including Today Parents, Scary Mommy, Love What Matters, and Her View from Home. Tia has a passion to guide others through the wilderness of life's journeys and extends a personal vulnerability others can relate to. Tia's words will soon be going from virtual to bookshelves with her first published print piece in the book So God Made a Mother, written by Leslie Means, and which hit stores and shelves in April of 2023. I have known Tia for I don't know, like almost 40 years. I think we met when we were in kindergarten. Our families were next door neighbors.
Yeah.
And I think we lived in that kind of next door neighbor vibe for, I don't know, 5, 6 years, something like that. Our paths varied. We went in different directions. But like anything else, you find somebody on social media where Facebook makes a suggestion that you may know this person or that person, or you hear about them through like your circles of friends. uh, and I came across Tia as a suggestion for a friend, linked up. I saw what she was doing. I think the work that she's doing, the messages that she's sharing are just amazing. And it has a lot to do with what she's overcome, what she's worked for. So I thought she was a perfect person to invite to sit down to hear about a book that's impacted her. When you see somebody that imparts great wisdom, I want to know what drives them, what encourages them, what gives them value, and just keeps waking them up to the work that they do. So, Tia, thank you for sitting down with me.
No, thank you for having me, John. It is my pleasure. It's been a long time, but it seems not as long while we're sitting here already having this short conversation.
Yeah, right before we recorded, when the screen popped up and I saw you, we were just like, "Oh my god! Oh my god!" Yeah,
I
yeah. I
know.
remember all those years vividly, vividly, your family, everything. So I love when that happens when you bump into somebody you haven't seen in a while, and it just you have a newfound appreciation for just who you were at that time, what you learned from that person, the experiences you have. So I'm really grateful that we connected again.
Yes, for sure. And I have some really wonderful memories of you being that next door neighbor before we hop into the seriousness of the book and stuff. But your parents had bought me this wonderful sweater that was my favorite for Christmas one year. And I will never ever forget how that, to this day, when I think about it, it's still a core memory for me. And they used to take us to the beach in that little red car that they had. You
Don't
remember
make me
that?
cry, man.
I
I love
know.
nostalgia. I love
Me
nostalgia. And
too.
it's crazy. Like there was one other person I bumped into online, or they saw that I commented on somebody on something, and they were like, "Are you the same John Jaramillo that?" Making it sound like my name is Mark Smith. Like, how
Yeah.
many John Jaramillos are there? But in any case, she was one of my teachers, and she's like, I recognized her name, said hi to her, and she's like, "I still have this music box that your parents gave me." It's like,
Oh,
you
wow.
know, the same kind of
Yeah,
stories. So, they loved you, and we had a blast. And
we did.
just in talking about it now, I really do cherish those memories because I mean that's the core of who you are, is
Yeah,
the great times that you have when you're at that age and just full of wonder and fun and before the bullshit and stress of life.
for sure. Absolutely. Just what you said.
So
So,
Tia, why don't we can you provide a little more breakdown of what you're up to today, what your work looks like, what you're trying to get out there, just so we kind of get an understanding, or my audience gets an understanding of who it is that's speaking to them. What's that value that you're putting out there?
Yes, thank you for asking. I am a registered nurse. And even though I don't bedside anymore, I've taken those skill sets, I've applied them to different areas at this point. I started out kind of like I guess a blogger when I was kind of I guess you would say I didn't want to put my name out there because I didn't want to be vulnerable.
Mm,
So it started in that way, and then I proceeded, and shared a little bit more about myself, my name. And then it's just kind of built up from there. That's been over the past like 6 or 7 years. And I, am off. I have an essay in a well established company's book that will be hitting bookshelves, as we've already discussed. I continue my blogging, but I also do wellness series for Fortune 500 companies. So that's something that's newer to me that I'm very excited about. It's virtual at this point in time, but I will be a keynote speaker soon, and I'll be traveling along with that. So, it's kind of just one thing has led to another, and I don't really have like a set path that I was taking. It's kind of just the doors have just opened, and I've kind of just accepted them, and along with the wisdom I've gained for the last 20 or so adult years of my life, I realize that you got to just have to be vulnerable and take the opportunities as they come, and, put your best foot forward and roll with it.
yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how much at peace you can feel when you're just going day to day. You don't have like that specific, rigid, long-term goal. You just know you enjoy blogging, you enjoy speaking, you enjoy helping people, doing wellness, and you can do these things day in and day out, and that kind of carries you as opposed to this is what I need to achieve way down in the future. And this is something that comes up so much here. I mean, for myself, like my mental health has been better when I can find enjoyment day to day in the work that I'm doing as opposed to just looking to the future. So when you say it's kind of unclear what's happening, but these doors are opening up, I love that that's happening for you.
Yeah, I mean, I, have lived in different seasons of life where I've been a perfectionist and I've struggled. I am a strong mental health advocate. That's actually the basis of my entire blog is mental health and motherhood, together and separate. But I have had the experiences to know, at this point in life, anyways, which I haven't always had, that, sometimes you just have to let the chips fall where they may
Mhm.
and take the opportunities that you're given and see where it's not even really about success or failure, because the journey is going to teach you. So if I don't get a million followers, or my book when I complete it doesn't reach New York Times bestseller, it's more about what did I learn and how did I evolve in that process. So I'm trying to
Mm,
be better as I've gotten older and just respecting you know the path that's been chosen for me, that I believe ahead of me even being here, and just kind of roll with those punches. So it's not about success or failure to me. It's just about being in that moment and taking what it is that I can get from it and applying it to my life in whatever season I'm at. I've struggled with anxiety, I would say my whole life. I probably wasn't aware of it until I was a teenager. And I've had, highs and lows with that. I've had episodic depression. I suffered from postpartum depression after my first child. So, the best teacher for me has been life. I can tell you all the accolades and the degrees, that I have, and those are fine accomplishments for
yeah,
sure. But
yeah,
life is the teacher.
yeah.
When you're trying to lead people, they need the story behind it. They don't want to know my my degrees. They want to know how I can relate to them.
Absolutely. I love that. You said it perfectly. So, but because you brought it up, you mentioned your perfectionism. So, what was it that made you shift from that perfectionism? Was it like a moment where you're like, this isn't working out, I just have to let go? Or was it like, was it a path of slowly discovering you could let go of that perfectionism to find more peace in the chaos? What was
I
it that made your mind shift from one to the other?
Well, I definitely think as an empath, and I will label myself as such, I want to do my best for anybody in my circle, and even those that I don't know. Still to this day, I can, look on social media and see something that affects my heart and wish that I could change it or save them, or whatever the situation may be. The problem really escalated when I got married, and my husband is an active duty, service member, and he was away a lot. He was deployed a lot. We started having a family, and it really was all on me.
Mhm.
And the ratio was different. It wasn't one-on-one. It was 3 kids and 1 parent. And I was a single parent in my younger years with my first child, and then me and my husband had 3 together. So I've been a single parent, and I've been what I like to call a solo parent. And they were different, right? Because my home when I was a single parent was set up as a single parent home.
Mhm.
My home as a solo parent was not. It was set up as a 2 parent home. So things were actually more difficult at times being a solo parent. Because it was just a different setup, if that makes sense. So my anxiety got to a level where I almost could not leave my house, if I'm being completely honest, but I had children to take care of. Um, there were things that I just could not do. And I was in a state where I had no family, and I lacked the support, which I realized was so very important to have. I
Mhm.
just didn't know how to go about creating a new village, if you will,
Yeah.
because mine was, back home. Um, so it's almost like one of those things where I just, you hit rock bottom. I hit rock bottom is what it was. I was deteriorating. I wasn't eating. My mental health was declining. And, therapy has always been a saving grace for me. I'm an advocate of it for men, women, children, everybody. And I had to set boundaries, not with other people necessarily, but with myself.
Mm.
So
Sometimes those are the most important.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Somebody had asked me, I think I was giving a talk online, maybe it was just last week, and they were like, going into 2023, the short of it was they were asking, "Where do you say no?"
yeah,
And I'm like, "You know what? I'm not gonna lie, there's not, like, a lot of people pulling at my time, pulling at my energy because I learned a long time ago, don't put up with any bullshit or toxicity.
yeah,
If you see something going down a path that you don't want, just get out of it early."
sure.
And she asked me, she's like, "So where do you say no?" I'm like, "I say no to myself."
Yeah.
As soon as you feel like that mental health kinda deteriorating, or you're exhausted, or you're feeling burnt out, or you're trying to take on too much to be too much maybe, that's who I'm saying no to. So I love the fact that you're saying, like, you're setting boundaries with yourself, not so much with other people. I can relate to that piece of it.
Yeah, and then it's not easy, right? Because we develop our own habits, and we want to keep ourselves safe, right? So, sometimes we want to learn how do I say it? It's like sometimes we want to learn, like, how do I live this way instead of giving me the tools to not live this way anymore.
Yes.
You're trying to cope with how you feel in that moment, rather than trying to put the efforts in to, not feel that way anymore at all. So it definitely wasn't an easy thing, and it's not something that even when you master, I would say, is not a daily it doesn't take daily effort. I mean, it's not something like, oh, I understand how this works and now it's gone.
Yes.
I mean, you're always going to be tempted to do more, to push more, to be perfect. And I just now I kind of, live my life by the 3 things, which is self-assessment, um, you know, realizing, because sometimes that's the first, like, people don't do that. Some, like, they don't even know
Mm.
how to do that. So that's one of my big approaches, is like, you have to self-assess, ask yourself the questions. Why do I feel this way? How come I feel this way? And you keep asking until you can't get an answer. Because most of us are like onions, right? You have to
Mhm.
peel the layer. We'll say, "Oh, well, I don't like to do that because, this reason." Okay, well then why is it that reason? And then usually we'll get to another answer. And then
Yeah.
you propose the next question, and then,
You're right.
like an onion, it goes down. So self-assessment, reflection, because you already know how whatever you're self-assessing makes you feel,
Mhm.
and then redirection. You have to redirect whatever it is that is going on in your life, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally. If your finances are not right, you have to redirect where you're putting your money. If you don't like where you are in your career, you have to put the effort and redirect your attention to, maybe creating a resume or getting your skill set up so that you can, do something else. Like it's all about redirection. So, and it's constant. It's like we're toddlers. We just have to keep redirecting ourselves constantly based on
Yeah.
who we are in any given moment of any given time. We're not who we were a year ago or 5 years ago, even, so it's a constant thing. But I think I've developed a way, at least with myself, and I help others, and it seems to, be something that's working a little
Yeah, no,
working
and
for
and
them too.
it's funny you mentioned, you have to talk to yourself like you're a toddler. Um, I kinda trained myself out of fearing something by the way that I talk to my son about, him being afraid of the dark.
Mhm.
"Buddy, you've feared the dark, you've been afraid for a couple years now, on and off, certain nights it's
Yeah,
worse than others. When has anything ever happened?"
happened.
And as I'm saying that, I'm thinking of, like, my own fear or trepidations or hesitations at that time, maybe fears about maybe, starting this podcast, whatever it was at the
Yeah.
time, and it's like, fear is just such bullshit, and I think when you get to that point where you realize how much it holds you back, it's very liberating because then you can just start experimenting,
And that is,
so
yes, no, that you said it, because that actually is like a good way into why this book, Daring Greatly by Brown, is so just inspiring to me. Because just like you said, like, your fear of starting the podcast, but you had to be vulnerable. And that's what this entire book is how, the courage to be vulnerable transforms every area of our life.
yeah,
And we look at vulnerability as a weakness a lot. Well, I don't want to put myself out there. What if people don't like it? And then you dig deeper. Well, what if people don't like it? Well, then that's because you feel rejected. And how does rejection make us feel? And you can go down levels and levels, but being vulnerable is not about failure or success. How she puts it is it's about getting in the arena and being seen. It's
mm,
about, putting yourself out there, because you never want to have the regrets of, but what if? What if I would have done it and it was a success? Because even if it's not, it doesn't change your worth. It doesn't change who you
yeah.
are. It doesn't change your ability to try again or move forward or get a better opportunity. It doesn't. So vulnerability is, to me, is just like an absolute, like, it
Necessity.
yeah.
Alright, but before we jump into the book, I wanna ask, what did your path look like to now? Meaning, when you start like, as a teenager, that's when you're starting to get your life together, like, the seeds are planted for where you're going. What did it look like for you from, like, teenagehood to now?
Sure. I mean, obviously, we grew up in the same small town, so you know how small it was, and everybody knew everybody. I didn't have a plan. I kind of did what my mother did and my cousins were doing, that were all kind of the same age. My cousins being the same age. It was kind of like you graduated high school, and if you didn't go to college, you started a family. I had my first child at 18 with my long-term high school, middle school boyfriend. We were, together for 8, 9 years before, I even had her. Obviously, we know at 18, none of us are well equipped to be the best adults, or, that we would like to be reflecting on now. So there were some tough times. I mean, I know my bond with my daughter is strong, and, I was a good mom, and I did the best I could with what I had. But, I think financially, emotionally, some of that was a little difficult, of course. Um, as I wrote all the time. I guess, let me backtrack a little bit. I had a shoebox in, the apartment complex we lived in, that I would write lyrics to songs. I always, like, all kinds of stuff. And it was just a little shoebox that I kept. I wish I would have kept it. So I always had a knack for writing and reading. When I would go to the babysitter's house on the weekend, because my single mom worked 7 to 7, she had romance novels in like a bag. And while today's kids would never get that opportunity, back in the 80s,
That opportunity.
yeah,
That
right.
opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I just read out of boredom, though. It was just,
Mm,
so I've always been a avid book reader and a writer, but I never had a passion that I thought that it would be a career.
okay.
So then I proceeded to, have my daughter. I worked for Fortune 500 companies in the insurance industry for over a decade. I was did a lot of clinical case management and disability claims and stuff like that. Totally forgot about my writing. It never even came up because I was working hard to take care of my daughter. And then I met my husband. And like I said earlier, he was in the military. I ended up having to be a stay at home mom. And that was really difficult. After our last child, our first child together passed away when she was 5 months. And I started to, it's like if you can't talk about your grief, write about it.
Mm.
So writing kind of hit me then because I was not ready to talk about it at all. So I just started journaling and writing all kinds of things. And while they were personal and not kind of like the bloggish posts you see now, it ignited a fire. Then we had 3 kids in 3 years, so this part is really quick. um, After she passed away, we found out on what would have been her first birthday that we were expecting our son. And then when he was 7 months, I found out I was expecting our last child, my daughter. So a lot of it is a blur. Um, because after my last daughter, they found a tumor when she was 6 weeks old that I had in my abdomen, and nobody knew what it was. So I was getting treated as if it was cancer while they did the biopsy. Long story short, it ended up being what they call a postpartum desmoid tumor,
Mhm.
which is very rare occurrence. It was not cancerous, thank goodness. But for about 8 months, I had to have all this reconstructive surgery to my abdomen. And when you have an infant and a toddler, and a husband that's in and out and you're out of state from your village, I mean, I think that's when I really hit like rock bottom, and I had nobody but my pen and paper. That's
Mhm.
really all that I had. Um, my husband was in and out, and by all means helpful and supportive, but it was just a really bad time. So that ignited, that bottom has kind of, developed into this. I just started writing again, and then being a stay-at-home mom with little kids, that's it. I started my little blog. At first it was anonymous. I wasn't being vulnerable. I didn't want people to know who I was. Maybe a year later I said, okay, well, I can put my name out there, or, and then I was just little pieces that I was as I felt comfortable. And then it gradually, I remember it was right before COVID. I was sitting at my kitchen table. The kids went back to school because we know that homeschooling season with them
Yeah.
was a little rough. And I was like, okay, my kids are self-sufficient and they're in school. Who am I? What am I going to do?
Mhm.
And I made a submission to a well-known motherhood blog, and I waited days and it came back and they accepted it. And you would have thought like I was a New York Times bestseller. I mean, the tears that poured from my eyes,
Yeah.
and I just said, this is it. This is where my focus is. And I had been innately getting some, I call them whispers, but your instinct kind of pushes you towards things. And so that was kind of like the finality of that, is that I was like, okay, so I've just been, while I mom and still do life, in this crazy military world that we live in, it just kind of flourished from there. And, doors have opened, not necessarily ones that I've asked for or thought
Mhm.
that, that I was trying to aspire to. But man, I'm so grateful, and, learning things along the way from other people who are in this arena, as I like to call it, with me. It's just been fantastic. I mean, it's had its ups and downs, of course. You have to be very careful not to base how far you'll go based on the response from other people. I don't have 50,000 followers or, 100,000 followers. So it's very easy to get caught up in that, especially when you're
Mm.
putting so much of yourself into something. Um, but that's how I got here. Not in a
So
nutshell.
no, 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 that was beautiful. So, I mean, I can take a guess at it. So does it make sense looking back at your childhood that this is what you would be doing now?
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you some why quickly.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I don't think people are necessarily meant to have one passion in their life, right?
Hmm.
So, people think, "Oh, well, I'm a nurse. This is what I'm supposed to do for my entire life." When I got my nursing degree, I was very well aware, again, intuitively, that I would not be a bedside nurse, that it was the credentials that I needed to do something else that I wanted to do. I'm still, I have an idea, but I'm still figuring that out. Still figuring that out. But when I worked in corporate America, I was doing all these things like clinical case management. These were things that I had to review and assess other people's medical records and make a determination based on disability. And this was before nurses had to do it. I think now they pretty much are staffed appropriately. So, as a 24-year-old, I'm over here like, oh, let's see what that is. But when I look back at it now, I have my thoughts and opinions, but that was my job.
Yeah.
And then when I graduated nursing school, my mother gave me something as a gift, and I will never forget it because I would have never remembered it. And it was a booklet from kindergarten where you make your, all about me. My
Hmm.
favorite food is chicken. My favorite, thing to do is, whatever. And it said, what I want to be when I grow up is a nurse. What it said, I want to be a nurse and I want to watch apples fall from the tree. Now I don't know what the apples falling from the tree reference is, but I was in purple scrubs, which I own, long curly hair, and to this day I don't ever remember drawing that, but I knew that in kindergarten that nursing was going to be a part of my life, and it was gone for 20 something years. And even when I decided to go into nursing, there was no connection because I never remembered it. So, that's just, yes, I definitely think in writing, of course, now when I look back, like, oh my goodness, I've always been reading and writing. I have bookshelves all over my house. And, I'm the person that goes and I don't buy one book, I buy 5 books.
Yeah,
um,
for 2023, my one of my intentions is just to read one book at a time. Because what I was doing for so long was just like I would have 4 or 5 books, all different types, and depending on my energy, I'd grab one or the other, or how the reading was,
that's
how the
me.
wording was, the
Yep.
author. But this year, I'm trying to stick to just one at a time.
That's
So
a goal that we both have for 2023. I did the same thing.
yeah,
I have 3 books that I was reading. If one got a little too heavy, I was like, oh, I'll go over to this fiction. It's a little
exactly.
lighter. Yeah. So I get that. And I think that that's what most avid book readers do.
Yeah.
But then it tends to not let me complete them as quickly as I would like to.
Yes, yes. And I'd just like to say, if anybody's out there hiring for somebody to watch apples fall from trees, I'm your guy. I'm your guy. Tia and I got you covered.
We got you. It was great.
Um,
I mean, it was great. I was like, wow, I was quite the artist. I mean, it was very vivid colors, all of it. It was a great book. I will
yeah,
cherish it forever. But yeah, I do think when we're young, we intuitively know, not necessarily that we're going to do this for careers, but pay attention. Like I pay attention to what
yeah,
my kids' passions are right
yep,
now because
absolutely.
um even if they have to forget like I did for a time, I want to be able to remind them in case
Mm.
they've forgotten. Um
How old are your
yeah,
kids, Tia?
my son will be 13 this year, and my daughter, they're 11 and 12 right now. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So yeah, I definitely, they have very strong passions. My son is in baseball, die hard into baseball, and my daughter's a competitive dancer. So they do have, and my daughter, I knew that since before she could talk. So, we're invested in what they're invested in, but that doesn't mean that's what they're going to do for the rest of their life. My
Yeah,
son is very he has a lot of intuitive abilities too. And when he was little, he has a journal, and I have it in safekeeping of what needs to go in the cancer cure. He just would always have these like little blurps that he'd come out, and one of the ingredients was tree sap. I have not heard the word tree sap, for years. And he was a little guy when he said that, and he was like 6 or 7. And then he followed up with, "Is that a thing?" And I said, "Okay, I got to keep this stuff. I have to keep this stuff. This may mean something somewhere down the line one day, as crazy as it sounds in 19 or whatever it was, in 2039 or 2049,
Yeah.
this may be the information we're looking for.
No, I believe it because I mean, we have that sense of wonder as a kid, that dreaming as a kid kind of educated out of us, where we kind of have to follow society's script of what it looks like, whether it's education or going into, the trades, whatever it might be. And we lose that sense of wonder. And I mean, for the
Yeah,
most part, most of the people that I coach, when they get to a point where they're finally fulfilled or happy or happier or working in that path towards happiness in their career or their leadership, it's because they have gone back to pick up that wonder and bring it forward
yeah,
in some small way,
yeah,
some small fashion, whatever it may be. They go back to what it is they maybe not wanted as a 4-year-old, but their core
sure.
values. Because we
Yeah,
forget those. We see a job description, we're like, okay, that's what you need. I'm not going to bring any of this in. That's
right.
all you need. So that's what I'm going to do. But when they go back and they go into their heart and they think about what it is they wanted, and it originates from when you're a kid.
Sure. And that's why people develop hobbies. Like if you were always an artist, but then you became a school teacher because you needed to make money, and you thought this is what I could do, and you went and got your degree, but maybe on the side, when you're out with your family, or you're going on vacation, you want to go into the art museums, or you try to plan things, I'm going to go to a paint night. Like it doesn't really ever necessarily leave you. Sometimes it's just hidden deeper, I think.
Hmm.
And some people like me, I had no idea about the nursing, didn't remember it for years. But when it came back, I mean, after my daughter passed away, that's kind of where I was like, I need to be a nurse. Like there was no question. There was no question. And, I dived in, and I dived hard. I was not stopping until I got that. So, life does take you not necessarily on that straight and wide road, but sometimes those windy, narrow roads are, they get you to the same place. And we don't know which one,
Yeah.
we're chosen to follow.
Yeah, but I love that idea of keeping in mind, because we've talked about our kids right before we started recording this, and the different ages and their person, and how your kids are different personalities.
Oh, yeah.
They may look alike or maybe not, whatever the case may be, but their personalities stand out clearly. Like what kind of, if they're inquisitive, loud, rambunctious, more
Yeah.
introverted, solo, and I mean all of that is going to factor into who they are later. So I love that we can bring that forward, that understanding of what we see as kids and what it might mean for our future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my husband and I say all the time, like, same kids, same house, totally different. Like in any way, shape, or possible, our kids are they're very close though, but they're total opposite. One is like the rainbow in the sky. Have you seen, I'm sure you have you seen the movie Trolls, the first Trolls
Oh yeah.
movie? So we've got Poppy and Branch here, literally. Like my son is very
They're just that
serious.
different. Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
he has his own level of anxiety. He's not a risk taker. He's analytical. And then my daughter's like, it's going to be fine. Everything's great. The world is beautiful, but I don't trust the world with her because she doesn't have that sense of,
Yeah, the
so it's just
boundaries.
different. Yeah. Yeah. And, anytime they say mom, a lot of parents don't realize like your brain actually switches to what response you give what child. Like that's why as parents, I think sometimes we're so frazzled because you
That's
can't handle
funny.
the same situation the same way with different kids. They could ask you the
Yeah, no, that's
same question and you will respond differently, even if it's the same answer.
yeah, because I mean, you're building a profile on your kid as
For
they
sure.
act. You're recomputing the way you interact with every action that they give you or show you. So
Yeah.
yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Tia, before we jump into the book,
Yeah.
one question I like to ask is what is your definition of leadership? What does leadership mean to you?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Leadership to me is the ability to not always know the answer, but to find it and crave it. I guess I would say. Obviously, that wasn't a prepared answer, but I
That's a
guess what
good
I'm trying.
word though, crave.
Yeah, I think as a leader, for me, is that I want the answers for even when I have one-on-one clients. Like I want to help them, so I want to get to the bottom or want to seek the answer. But I also know that being a good leader is not letting them think that I have all the answers. And
Mm.
I think in leadership, that's something that, and as a prior perfectionist, that we
A
tend,
recovering perfectionist.
recovering perfectionist, we tend
Yeah.
to feel is that we have to know everything.
Mm.
But letting people know that we don't is okay too, because it shows them that we're real and that we're authentic and we're relatable. So I
Yeah, I think if it's between somebody who positions themselves as thinking they know all the answers or somebody
Mhm.
that says, "Listen, I'm gonna save us some time. I don't know
Yeah,
the answers, but I'm gonna do my best to find out, find the right people." I think people underestimate, or leaders may underestimate, how much they can trust other people. Again, a word you brought up, that
right.
they can be vulnerable with
Yeah,
other people, because I think that's what people are looking for. Like you said, again, you're human like me. I'm not
yeah,
holding you just to this insane standard. The humanity of it is important, and I think people will appreciate seeing that. So thank you for bringing that up.
yeah. I don't like the word boss because the connotation behind boss, bossy. Like I like the like leadership, or it's a different, it's a different take, and sometimes the words we use can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, they matter. They set the tone.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
yeah, even if they sound similar, just using one over the other makes all the difference. All right, so now let's jump into the book. How did you come across this book, or introduce the book again, if you could? How did you come across the book?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
made you want to read it?
Um, I don't remember how I came across the book, but I know it was during the time where I was having several surgeries and my writing had kind of I started journaling how I felt after I had my last child. So that was probably 2012, 2013. I'm sure it was just a normal, I was in the bookstore and it was on the, new reads type of thing. So it was, there's no real great background to it. But it's interesting because the first time I read it, and when I skimmed it, just kind of going back over my notes from then, there's so many different things that I pulled out of it today that are reflective of what I'm doing now, that weren't reflective of where I was when I was recovering, when I had a new baby and a new family. And, I was, for all intents purposes, not doing well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a wonderful book. It is, I guess what fascinates me about it the most is that it's a book for everybody. There's not one person that could read this book and be like, I mean, it may not be their type of book that they're used to reading, but it applies to everybody.
Tia, what's the full title of the book?
Yes, I'm so sorry. It is
No, no
Daring
worries.
Greatly by Brene Brown. Um, and she has Netflix specials. She's a speaker. Also, she's somebody that I follow on all her social media. She gets it. She has a PhD, and what she did in this book was she was actually a researcher,
Hmm.
and she was researching vulnerability. So that's something different that I don't think that we see that much, is people who are researching emotions and then applying them to our everyday life. I like in here how she explains that, as like a researcher, as a leader, as a boss, whatever your preference is, it's like we have to, sometimes we put up a guard that, we have to know everything, and we're not supposed to be vulnerable by sharing our own, they tell you even in workplaces, like, don't share your personal stuff,
Mm.
keep that stuff away, but, she really digs into, but why? That's how we seek connection. And that's how we connect with people. We don't connect with people at an intimate level by saying, oh, you have, your master's degree. I have my master's degree. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's like you said, like your
yes,
accolades, your degrees. Yeah, that's great, but it doesn't really tell me anything about you.
right.
You know what I
So
mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't. I mean, okay, so it takes a spin on that, and then and it's just basically saying how, being vulnerable, because we all create connection, it's not about winning or losing, it's about the courage it takes, and everybody is in that space multiple times in their life. And that's why I say, this book is genuinely for everybody to read, and you can take away from it all different things, because she talks about vulnerability in almost every area, in work, in leadership, in parenting, in your personal, like in your personal life, just in living. So I love it. It's easier, of course, she explains, to be vulnerable when we are loved and when we feel safe. And that is a big component. And again, that goes back to the connection and
Mhm.
support, that people need. She touches base on, gosh, so many things in here. So many,
What,
so many
how
things.
is it, how is the well, first of all, do you remember I know it was a while ago, but do you
Mhm.
remember what it is that stood out? I know you said you were, like, at that tough point in your life, but do you remember what it was
Yeah.
that might have resonated, whether it was just the title or flipping through the book? What was it that you, if you can remember, that led you to want to have this book in your life or read it based on maybe where you were, what you were going through?
Yeah, I think I wasn't suicidal, but I felt like I wanted to give up. I felt like I was trying so hard, like to do, like I said, we had just had I had 3 kids in 3 years, and my husband was gone a lot. Our first child together had passed away. It was a lot in a short period of time, and it's kind of one of those, I'm a good person, why me?
Hmm.
I'm a good person, why me? Like I keep trying, and I'm being tested. And I think it was the title. It was Daring Greatly. And I didn't really know what the book was about when I picked it up, but I'm pretty sure that it said Daring Greatly. And I knew that I had to do something. I knew, I always read the back of the books. In the first line, I'll just read here. It says, every day we experience the uncertainty, risks, and emotional exposure that define what it means to be vulnerable or to dare greatly. In a world where never enough dominates and feeling afraid has become second nature, vulnerability is subversive, uncomfortable, even a little dangerous sometimes. Which was all true, obviously, but I needed something that I could relate to from where I was in such a dark place, and I needed to get out. And I think the title just struck me, and me skimming the back and looking, through it like I do with most books that I
Wh
buy.
what's the rest of the title?
That's it. It's just Daring Greatly.
But what I isn't that what's the I thought there was,
Oh, sorry.
because I looked it up when you had mentioned it.
Yeah.
I
I
forget
mean,
what
it
the
says how Daring Greatly, how the courage to be vulnerable
that's it.
transforms the way we live, love, parent, and lead.
Okay.
Um, and it's just a phenomenal book.
So how's it structured, Tia? Like, you don't have to go through, like, the
Sure.
title of every chapter, but, like,
Yeah.
is there some kind of progression? What does the path look like? What's the order of the chapters? Like, what kind of path does she set you on,
So
in the book?
initially she tells you like what it means to dare greatly. So, you go into the book knowing what the rest is kind of going to, she sets up the whole premise for the rest of the book. You have to understand what it means to dare greatly, which again was to like be in the arena, to make yourself seen. It's not about success or failure. It's about, the person that's in there tattered and and bloody, if you will. But yeah,
Warts and
sometimes,
all.
yeah, you're gonna feel that success, but sometimes you're not. But it doesn't take away your worth, or your experience, or what you did, right? So it wasn't about, that was a big thing, is that it's not about, success or failure. It's just about you going in and making yourself seen, so you don't have the regrets and you don't
Mhm.
have the, well, what if. And then she goes into her own personal experiences a little bit, which I like, because again, that was vulnerable, and that's obviously what she's teaching. And she's says, what I had said briefly before on how, as a researcher, you're not supposed to share. You're supposed to have like this very analytical brain with your hypothesis.
Yep.
You so she explains that a little bit more in depth, and gives you her personal experiences of even when she was doing the research, how she was struggling with the answers based on where she was in her life.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and then it goes over, like looking inside our culture of scarcity, which is a huge thing, right? There's never enough. It doesn't matter what we do, we're never enough. I'm not talking about the eggs on the shelf in the grocery
Or
store
the
now.
toilet paper.
Yeah, or the toilet paper during COVID, right? But
Yeah.
just like it's always more. If you've got 50,000 followers, well, now you need 100. If it,
That
it
it's a
just,
society of, like, want, that it's more about scarcity than
yeah,
abundance, than, that it's not a zero-sum game kinda thing,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Is that
well,
what I'm
even look at celebrities, right? So, they have all this wealth, or you look at, I was watching on Netflix, kind of like a crime series yesterday. And they were this well-established, rich, very wealthy, prominent family. And they were doing astronomical things to maintain and even, to maintain their wealth or even surpass what they already had. It's never enough here because
Mm.
we're always being judged, and with, technology, while it has its strengths, of course, and it's a fantastic tool for a lot of things. I mean, oh my goodness, the little blurps of, you can look at your comments on anything and somebody's got an opinion, right?
Yeah.
So it's just always, there's just never enough. You never feel like you're enough. And she intertwines vulnerability with why we don't want to be vulnerable, because we want to prevent those things. Our brain is wired to prevent us from getting hurt. So we typically try to do anything we can to, again, not be vulnerable, even
Hmm.
if in that vulnerability will ultimately get the success we want. Sometimes we don't even go there because the risk is just too high.
Yeah.
And you need vulnerability for success. You don't know one person that's ever just, gotten to their adult life and become a success without being vulnerable. Everything they've done to get to that point has caused them to, they've been vulnerable that whole journey.
Yeah, it's full of risk, it's full of
Yeah,
stress. I mean, yeah, we're programmed to kind of avoid that. We want it to fall, into a beautiful package, you
absolutely.
know? Yeah, we wanna see, like, the highlight reels. We don't wanna see typically, the traditional thinking is we don't wanna see, like, the bruised, the tattered, the worn, anything like that. We
No,
wanna see, like, the overnight success and not, like, the day-to-day grind of
of what happens, even though we
what
know it
happened.
exists, right? And then we get to an
Yeah.
age where we're almost obsessed with the story, right? So there's that. We want to hear, once we get to a certain age and we've been through our own things, then part of us does want to hear, well, how did they get that? What were the bumps and bruises that led them along the
Yeah.
way? And it gives us a motivation that, it gives us sort of a motivation, to pursue whatever it is that, we're trying to get to in our life. So, I mean, she definitely goes into that well in depth, that it is a clear understanding. I love that this book is not written, even though she has her PhD, it's written in layman's terms. I don't think it's a book that is very
Yeah.
difficult for anybody at any educational level, as an adult, that they couldn't understand or process, and apply. So that definitely, is one of the pluses of this, and you can read it over and over again. I mean, she goes into a lot more, the armors we put up against vulnerability, like, shutting down. You get in a fight with your spouse or your significant other and you walk away, because we don't want to be vulnerable.
Mm.
She goes into women's vulnerabilities and men's, and how they're different. Men, I she states, for men, and I asked my husband about this too without telling him the answers just the other day, because I had found some notes, and I was like, what's the biggest, thing for men to feel vulnerable? Like, don't men want to feel vulnerable? And he was like, 'cause we don't want to appear weak. And that was her number one answer, So, I mean, it's very much in a line. Obviously, she did the research to prove it too, but just,
Yeah.
hitting home, like, if
Yeah.
we're told not to cry, men are told not to cry, whereas women are allowed to show emotion, but women are also usually expected to kind of have it all together. You're supposed to look good. You're supposed to be thin. You're supposed to, follow this societal, it's not a norm, but somehow it's
Yeah.
a norm.
It's weird because no one's telling you this is what you need to look
Yeah.
like, but we have that impression, so it's almost like, can you really call it societal pressure, or is it the pressure you're putting on yourself based on what you see?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question, because I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it is based on what you see, because it's what people put out, right?
Yes,
You
yeah.
go to Instagram, just like you
Mhm.
said, and they're showing you their highlight reel. They're not showing you the guts. They're just showing you the glory.
Yeah.
So it is what we see, but we realistically know that that's not all that there
Mm.
is. But for some reason, our minds take the core memory of the perfection, and they think that, and it doesn't, maybe because a lot of us are, visual learners, and, we absorb things that way. If we're not seeing all of that, even though we know it exists, if we're not seeing the arena fights, right, then we think that however that person got there was easy, or, they
Yeah.
didn't put the work in, or, they didn't have, well, they don't have it like me. I'm a big proponent of not playing a victim, period. Like, that is one of my number one things. Like, we do not play victim in my house. That doesn't mean we don't show emotion. That doesn't mean we don't get sad. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean we have bad days. But I because it's very easy to, especially in these times. I'm learning with my tweens too. One of my kids is very sensitive, very sensitive. I'm sensitive too, but there's a fine line where you don't want them to use that sensitivity,
Mhm.
to get the attention, because they don't feel like, that they feel like that's the only way to get it. I'm talking like from friends, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but at the same time, like, they're tweens, you're talking about friends, but that same behavior, if it goes unchecked by
Yes.
us parents, that's what I tell my kid all the time. "Hey, listen, when I raise my voice or when I stop you in your tracks, whatever it may be, it's not that I wanna have fun doing it. It's not that I'm trying to bust your fun. You have to learn, because if I don't teach you and you go out into the world and you just think you can do whatever you want, the wrong person's going to end up teaching you a
Yeah.
lesson. So
Yeah.
it's like I have to do what I can to set you, to get your mind in the right spot. So
And
I
intention is a big deal here too. We always talk about, even when my kids have their little spats, like, well, was that your intention? Oh, he hit me with
mm,
it too. Okay, well, then the other show. Well, I did, but I was throwing it, in my closet, and she was there. Like, well, what? Let's look at the intention here.
yeah,
Not that that was right. We'll correct behaviors. You shouldn't be throwing things, but like,
yeah,
we got to make sure that we're reprimanding or discussing the right issue. And
the
sometimes,
foundation of it.
yes, and sometimes even as adults, I don't think, especially in leadership roles and work sessions, and we look at the things on the surface, right? We're just looking at the surface things, and we don't always address the core or the root of what needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and I'm only smirking only because I know obviously we grew up in the same era where, like, our parents were just kind of like, growing up in the '80s, it was like '80s and before was just kind of like, nope, cut the shit, like,
Yep,
that's it,
that's it.
done. Like, there's no discussion, there's no
Nope.
talking, like, nothing like that.
And it
So
is
it's
a
just a
different generation now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the difference in generation, you mention it now, or I bring it up because of the way that our parents spoke to us, the way that we're talking to our kids. It's a different world. But also, in going back to what you said about the pressures on, for instance, for example, men,
Mhm.
not to appear weak. So it's like, our dad's generation was just
Oh,
very
absolutely.
stoic,
Mhm.
very don't show weakness. You never saw them cry at all. And just having that conversation, it's another great example of having that conversation with my son where he'll ask me if I've ever been afraid, or if I've ever lost a friend, or if I've ever cried, whatever it may be. I'm just like, yeah, of course. Like, I
Yeah.
just don't hesitate. Um,
Because when they don't see it, they don't know that it's there. Like, that goes back to that, right? Not that we cry every day,
yeah, 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 yeah.
but like, when
No,
they don't see it, I mean, that's so great at their age, that they're so inquisitive and asking those questions. Uh,
yeah, and it's a lot that I don't want. I share it freely because I don't want him growing up thinking that he can't.
Absolutely.
Because internalizing all that shit does a number on you.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Who knows what it did to our dad's generation of men, where they had to internalize this I mean, I know not I'm not saying it's directly linked, but there was a lot of alcoholism and,
Oh,
across my dad's family. So
mine too.
was
My
it
dad's family, addiction, alcoholism. It's interesting because my dad came up here. It was like a couple years, like 2 years ago or whatever, and my dad never talks to me about like his childhood and stuff, and we just
Mm,
somehow got into a conversation about that. And for purposes, I guess, of privacy and stuff, I won't go into the details, but I knew surface stuff. Like I just said, there was alcoholism and addiction in there. But why my dad is the way he is, while it's not justified, it's understandable,
mm,
right? So
yeah,
I don't justify, his behaviors from me being a kid and growing up, but I understand them as an adult. And
yeah.
so, I obviously can't go back and fix them and,
Well, again, like you said, like you have your kids' behavior, but then what's the root cause behind that? And it's the
Yeah.
same kind of thing. You see something that your dad or my dad did or didn't do, and you never really got that insight. I've talked about it, how I really don't know much about my dad. He showed us nothing but love, but
Mhm.
they never really shared any real details. They're definitely, I mean, I've already talked to my kid more about lessons and, where I'm coming from than my dad ever did in his life.
I say
And
that
it's
to
just the
my
way they
mom.
grew up. It's
Yeah,
just
all the
it's just the way they
time,
grew
like
up.
yeah, it is, because I say to her all the time, like, "Mom, I don't remember us talking when I was a kid. I remember
Mm,
coming home from school, cleaning the house." Like, I
yeah.
remember her being there, so I know she wasn't an absent parent. I know she was a single parent, so she worked a
Mhm.
lot, but I mean, even when she was home, it was like Sundays were for cleaning and, like, tasks, right? It was all task based. They went to work, they came home, they provided, we had food, we had shelter, and it was a totally different experience for us and a whole different life. And I think what's so interesting for people in our generation is that we're the ones that have seen this transformation, right?
Mm.
Technology, post technology,
Yeah,
our
yeah,
generation of growing up and our kids' generation of growing up.
yeah. I say it
And
all the time that just our generation, just that mix of before social media and then after social media. There's so many, you can say before the '70s, before after the '70s, before the '80s, after the '80s, but there's just something about that technology and that instant access.
oh
Like,
yeah.
you know, when we lived in Shaw Drive, it was just kind of like you knew where your friends were by like following where the bikes were
Yeah,
thrown on the lawn. And your
yes.
parents said, come home when the lights come on. Like that
You went and
really
knocked
is a
on a
thing.
stranger's door. I think Billy lives in that hallway.
Yeah,
You just
yeah,
did
yeah.
it. There was no fear. There was it just and I what me and one of my best friends were talking about it. I don't know if you remember Janessa, but I was like, we as bad, and I say that with quotes, right? As bad as it was then, like, man, what we would give to go back to that time, right? Like there wasn't I mean, I know our parents had stress, like, maybe financial
Hmm.
stressors and stuff like that. We didn't grow up rich but the stress was different, right? It
Mm,
wasn't like the emotional stress that most of us at some point in time deal with now. Like, because we are hit with so much information and the be all can all, like, it's just insanity.
yeah.
It really just is. We didn't have, we had the news that came on at 6 o'clock. It wasn't on repeat from the time we got, we had it in the morning on our way to school to see if we had a snowstorm, and we had it at night. And those were your two doses of what's going on in the world. Now we can go on and find not just what's going on in your town or in your state, but literally anywhere, any second of the day.
Yeah.
And if people think that that doesn't contribute to our stress, our anxiety, our anxiousness, and our children's too, they have this instant gratification that they've have been growing up in. It's not even their fault. You can't be mad when they're like, "Oh my God, the internet's out. What happened?"
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
raining, and I can't go on
Yeah.
my game. Because it's not their fault that they're accustomed to it. I mean, we've adjusted to it too. Oh man, I
Yeah.
can't work. The internet is out. I see people on our little neighborhood forum that are like, we have a lot of work from home in my neighborhood, and they're like, did anybody else's internet go? You can see the rage come through and then you have to though, but that's a boundary. You have to take a
Well,
step back
yeah,
and
absolutely
say,
though.
what I can go on a walk right now.
Mm,
What can I do right now? Because I can't do this and I can't change it. So I can be mad, or I could do something else that's fulfilling, or something else that's going to bring me joy, or something else that I can work on. I mean, I'm still a very tangible book reader. I
mhm.
can't get into the online. I try, but like, bring out a book. I'd bring out my pen, my paper, so those are boundaries too. When things don't go your way, you have to know how to change your perspective, change the lens that you're viewing it through, and adjust a little. And that's not easy. That's taken me a really long time to implement, because we
Yeah,
are who we are characteristically. We just are.
yeah. No, and I love that we brought up that generational difference, what it was like for our kids now versus us growing up. And yeah, our parents, it was just a matter of survival.
Hmm.
As long as you have shelter, you have food, like, and we
You're
love you,
good.
you're
You're
good. Like,
good.
that's all you
That's
need. That's
it.
You know what I mean? So, and yeah, society has evolved, technology has evolved. There's so much out there that just hits you all at once. So it's just,
But we've adapted too, right? Because I won't let my daughter walk to the bus stop alone
yeah.
because
Oh,
it's out of
remember?
sight. And we were walking like a
Yeah,
mile, like
yeah,
miles, like together, like find a friend who's walking. It wasn't even a setup. Like, oh, I talked to John's mom and you guys, like, it was just like, I don't know, the kids are out there. Bye. See you
yeah,
later.
yeah. No, I
And
walk my son to the bus stop. It's like, a block and a half away. It's not even
can you
that far, but it's
imagine
just
though
around
letting
the
him do
corner.
it?
But yeah, we used to leave like the neighborhood development, walk out to the main road, and
Just live. It's crazy
it's
when you
just
think
it's
about
just amazing how things have evolved.
I
In the
know.
snow, like, you know,
Yeah.
I think about that all the time and walking to the bus stop. I'm like, man, look, you got sidewalks. We had to stand like on the side of a hill and
Yeah.
nobody cleaned it and we'd stand
Nobody
in the
can
snow and
snowsuits and all kinds of stuff. I mean, can you even
yeah.
imagine though letting your son walk to that bus stop alone? It almost it incites fear, at least in me, to let my daughter do that. And I think about like what we were just saying, like, oh my gosh, you walked to school. Like,
And it wasn't like we walked to the bus stop and there was like one adult with a group of kids. It was
no,
just all like
just
everybody
kids.
would just join the group and just walk.
Yeah,
It's just how we grew up.
it
So
is.
Tia, for this book then, what was your biggest takeaway then? How did you implement it? How did you see changes in your behavior or approach to life or work or whatever it may be based on what you learned in the book?
I mean, I think like all things, it's me questioning myself, like those things I said earlier, like self-assessment, because I have to, you're not going to remember a whole book and all of the
Mm,
points that it taught you. Yes, I can go back and look at my side margin notes and stuff, but how I try to remember books is by summarizing it for me, and I'm a bullet point person. So that's what it was. It was those three core elements. It was, it wasn't even written in here. It was just my takeaway. And that's kind of what I've been basing my own, business model on. And it is, self-assessment, reflection, and redirection. Because so that's where I stop myself when I see things getting to a certain point. If my anxiety is too high, okay, let's hold up. What's going on here? Why is it high? Okay, well, you've had a very busy 3 weeks, with the family. Because not all stress, your body can't interpret stress as bad or good.
yeah.
I'm helping my friend plan a wedding. That's all fun and great, and I'm so happy for her. But it's there's still a level of stress. There's
Yeah.
a lot of things that have to be done. So I just self-assess, and then okay, so you know that this is kind of what's been going on. Well, the reflection. I know if I keep going, this is how I'm going to feel because I've been there before.
Hmm.
Well, so now I have to redirect. And how is that redirection going to look? Well, it looks different based on what's going on. So maybe I look at my calendar, that has lots of colors and, projects and dates and times for not just myself, but my family, right? And I see what I can move. Right. We're not going to cancel the dentist appointment tomorrow. I mean,
Hmm.
but we'll schedule it for 2 more weeks when that's an open week. And I'm very, that's a good boundary thing for me is because I have to do it all when I say I'm going to do it. I'm a list maker and I'm very much a, I'm trying to find the right words. I like to make lists, but I have to complete all the tasks or I don't feel like I did anything.
Yeah.
So that's how I would get burnt out. I would just, I have to do this. I said I was going to do it and I have to do it. So now I just, there's still times where I overcommit, right? There's still times where I
Yeah.
have a busy week. It's not ever going to be perfect, but if I got my schedule from 10 things this week, and I cut it to 5, that's still progress. Baby
Yeah.
steps
Absolutely.
matter. Baby steps matter. And it's not something that you learn or do all at once. It's just like anything else. It takes consistency. Did this work for me? Okay, I moved these 2 things. How do I feel? Oh, I don't feel, not stressed, but I'm maybe not as stressed as if I had these 2 things to do, and you just constantly have to learn who you are because we are not always the same person that we were even a month ago, maybe,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's,
True.
so you have to do that self-assessment. Like, where am I in my life? Like how much, because there's a lot more that I can take now than let's say when I told you I was having those surgeries. There's no way I would have been able to do half of, the schedule that I do now. So you
Yeah.
do have to assess where you are in life too, and your capacity.
So that list, that 3 bullet list that you
Mhm,
have, that
mhm.
stems from reading this book? That was your
Yeah, yeah, that was my I have notes in here that that was it, and, I've also but I it's funny because I've engaged that without using those words all along. I think I've kind of
Yeah.
lost those words, if you will, along the
Mhm.
way, but when I reflect on it, right,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"That's where it came from," I
I
just
mean, as long as you have the practice, maybe it's not in those words, maybe it's
Yes,
not in, 3 steps, but at the very least, you're stopping, you're looking around, you're taking
yeah,
stock, and you're rerouting, just to use other words. But as long as you have that practice of just stopping, taking stock, and figuring out what you need to change, I mean, those are like it seems like those are the basic steps you need is just assessment,
yeah.
reflecting, and then redirecting.
And then that's being vulnerable even with yourself, right? Because vulnerability is the risk taker, right? You know well, what if I don't do these things and I miss this opportunity? What if I
Mm.
reschedule and they say, I'm sorry, we found somebody else?
Or they look at me differently.
Right, are they going to judge me because they're going to think that I'm not professional, or like it's still vulnerability. Like every decision includes vulnerability in our life, but it's always worth the risk because is burnout, is that the alternative to it? And you can't it also takes vulnerability to receive and offer information, even because you can't change how somebody receives the information you give, right? You don't know what their interpretation is going to be of it. I've had a couple of clients that I've talked to where they're from, I mean, I'm in the South now, but clearly I'm from up north and I talk fast and I'm very passionate. And a lot of people aren't used to that here, even, and, then they have conversation with me and, sometimes the energy I can pick up a little bit and I'm like, okay, I think I'm too much. They're just not used to, they have these slow Southern draws and stuff, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily negative. It's just it may be just new to them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's just new.
You have that self-awareness.
Yes, yes, yes. And you don't know if somebody else does. You don't know where they are on their journey. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know what they've been through. So I think we're very opinionated, not just of ourselves, but how somebody else is receiving what we're offering them.
Mhm.
Like, oh, they must be feeling this, or what if they're thinking this? And then we analyze it, and you go down the rabbit hole, and then that causes anxiety and stress. If your intention is good and you're doing your best and you're giving your best at any given moment, even if there's errors. I don't like to say failure because I
Yeah,
feel like
me
you only
either.
fail when you give up, right?
Yeah.
So even if there are errors, I mean, if you were being your true and authentic self in that moment, then be proud of yourself, and don't go back. Don't go back and analyze it. That was one thing I know Brene Brown, the author of this book, says that she doesn't do is when she gives a TED talk or when she, is on a Netflix special, she doesn't go back. After it's done, it's done. If she felt great, she got off that stage, she, got off that mic, she doesn't go back because she's going to analyze herself.
Mm.
And
And I
then
mean, it's in the past. What can you do now?
right, but she said even, if my book sold over 1 million copies, it clearly was helping people, and I'm over here upset about it. Like, how is that benefiting anybody?
Yeah.
And I think I've taken that lesson away from this book too. It doesn't mean that I haven't gone back and assessed myself, but it means that I've had to set a boundary of realizing that that's what I'm doing, and then question is this benefiting you? Is this going to stop you from doing the next project? What are you just going to crawl under a rock and never to do it again? So what is the purpose?
Yeah.
But we're all human, and I like to think that most people are doing their best. It's just the comparing that we constantly do in this society that is honestly hindering us because it's making us not vulnerable, or it's taking the vulnerability away. And so we don't want to risk, we don't want to take the risks that we all should be doing, because with risk, that comes communication, that becomes connection. All of that stuff is through, as she writes, the vulnerability. So that's exactly what we need.
Yeah, you're foregoing that value.
Yeah.
You're stopping yourself. I mean, yeah, we're it's amazing how much we may fear things that are out there, perceptions, opinions of other people, of people in our family, friends, whatever it may be, but we are our worst own enemies. I mean, we stop ourselves more than we're always afraid somebody else is going to stop us from doing something, but in the meantime, we're the ones that are stopping ourselves,
Yeah.
Hopefully not, but in the past, if you've learned, you're not stopping yourself as much as you have in the past.
Yeah, I definitely would say that for sure. I mean, and when I was, in my, there's certain things, I guess, if I think about that quickly and honestly. I mean, I think when I was in my 20s, I had a little bit more fire in me, because you're in your 20s. I mean, I remember, walking, to my, my big building and, downtown Hartford, with my latte or whatever. Well, probably hot chocolate then. I don't know, they had lattes, right? Walking in my heels on and, just feeling like I could take over the world. But I think as life happens to you, or in my situation, I had so many traumatic events happen that I started to cower
Mhm.
because I was just, I just felt like I was just getting punched in the arena, if you will. Like, and I just didn't want to get up anymore. I was just like, I'm just tired. But, the flip side of that is that you also have to know when you need time to not, you know, do and be and just take time for yourself to heal and rejuvenate and,
Breathe.
yes, and breathe and be mindful. And, so all good work is not working, sometimes it's
Yes.
stillness, sometimes it's just being. And that is very important. That's something that's important to me. The book doesn't necessarily address that stuff, but I'm very well aware from experience, right? Not anything I learned in a college seminar, is that being is work. And sometimes it's the toughest work. My husband is very much a go-getter. He's used to being like that in the military. So for him to like slow down and just be, it's something
It's
that's,
amazing that you do have to practice just being.
yeah.
That we're always reading to get better, having conversations to get better, training to get better, going to school to get better, starting a business to get better, but very rarely do we just stop and be. It's amazing that we need
We feel like we're
practice to
missing
just.
something, right? We feel like we're
Yeah,
missing something.
absolutely.
We feel like, we're missing the opportunity. We want to be liked. We want to be perfect. We want to know it all. We want to be smart. We want to, build up our authority to what I'm not necessarily sure, but it's been what we've been taught, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's at a cost if it's even at a, even if success is even, you know, attained.
Yeah.
Like, why are we striving for all this? I think our goal should be, yes, to what is success too, right? Is it money? Like, that's another thing that I always
Yeah.
say, the definition of success is something, as it's something, just because we were taught it doesn't mean that it's true, right? That's,
Absolutely.
we could go with a lot of things with that. Just because it's what somebody told you or what you see doesn't mean that that's exactly what it is. But mindfulness, gratitude, kindness, being, having boundaries, comfort, like that's life. That's the
Yeah.
good stuff.
And it takes a while, it takes I think it takes a while. It takes your own journey, it takes your own obstacles. Because I think we can tell our kids that, we can share that with them, but I mean, it's going to take them going through some obstacles and challenges to really understanding that we're not just nagging them with tips. We've
Absolutely.
lived it. We can try to set them up with the right tools, but I mean, we'll see if it takes.
Yeah, I mean, my 26-year-old, I mean, I'm so proud of her. She's been on her own now for a long time, and she's had her own set of obstacles, and it's hard because parenting never ends, right? So all I have right now, as far as she goes, is my ability to listen
Mhm.
and share with her my experiences, at least the ones that she hasn't, well, even if she's seen them, she doesn't have an interpretation like, everybody. If she didn't experience it, it's going to be different. So,
Yeah.
all I have is to be there for her, to listen and to share the experiences, and not just what I've been through, but what I learned through it. And I think that that's so important, is that sometimes we don't go deep enough,
Mm.
and again, that's something at the core of what I do, is getting to the root. You have to get to the root, because do you want to manage things or do you want to change things? And you have to ask yourself those things, because the change is where the discomfort is, right?
Yeah.
That's, managing things, it's like you're getting that from an outside source. So, when I talk to women and we talk about self-care, and they say, oh, well, I got my hair done, or I got my nails done, or I got a massage. No, honey, those are enhancements to self-care.
That's a good
Tho
point. Yeah.
they're enhancement, and they're great. Yes, you could be relaxed for that hour, but the self-care comes from you healing you.
Yeah.
Nobody else can do that, and that's scary, especially if you're somebody who is, been piling it down like a trash compactor, and just pushing it down, and you're not addressing the issues or dealing with the issues, or maybe you've even forgotten some of the things, you're triggered easily and you don't know why. There's everybody's level of traumatic experiences is different,
Yes.
and everybody's
Yes.
responses are different. So you really have to, you know, getting to the root of a person's issue, even if they've experienced the same thing, is still going to require them to do the self-assessment, to do the reflection, and to do the redirection. You can, and let them know that they have the tools within themselves. But some people are like, okay, well, if you give somebody a bag of tools that they don't know how to use them,
Yeah.
what good is that?
And and I just had this conversation with somebody a couple of days ago, but it's amazing. We think of trauma, and I think people just think about the worst as being trauma, but trauma can be all different kind of levels, all different levels of severity. So I think everybody has some kind of trauma. They're not all comparable, they're not all the same, but it's all there where it kind of changes the way you look at life as you move
Yeah, I
forward.
mean, as somebody who's lost a child, right? And that's like the worst traumatic event, some would say, that could happen to anybody, and it is. There's other traumatic experiences that have happened in my life because of where I was at mentally and the age I was, could be considered, if this makes
Hmm.
sense, just as bad.
Yeah.
So when I was like, I don't know, 9, I remember going into the babysitter that was right there in our little area, and I opened the door to ask if I could go to a friend's house. And I startled her. She was drinking water at the sink. She just didn't expect me, and she had a heart attack. And I got blamed for the heart attack, right? Because
What?
like our parents were like, it was your fault. Like, to this day, that still has affected me as an adult. I'm very well aware I didn't cause her to have a heart attack.
Yeah.
So it's not a guilt that I feel, but the
But
trauma
it's an
caused,
association.
yes, and the trauma that it caused me at that time. I mean, I remember saying, "No, I didn't," but it was, you are hurt. You are, what is it? Like when you're a kid and you to be seen and not heard type of thing. My voice meant nothing back then to any of the
Mm,
adults in the situation. Her family. My mom was scared that she was going to lose the babysitter. She was a single mom. Like, they all had their own
yeah.
fears and
What was
things.
at
So
stake for them? Yeah.
yes, and not that they didn't love me or care about me, but it's where they were in their life and the fears and their knowledge and wisdom. So, like you said, a traumatic experiences can be. That's why I never like to judge people on their hard. And
Yeah.
I tell my kids that no, we're not going to say, well, this, was worse for me. No, 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 no. And I don't do that with any of my traumatic experiences either. Never compare them, because you don't know, how anything has affected anybody ever.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, they definitely, if there was a range for them, which I understand what you're saying, like, you can't base, somebody's responses off of, oh, well, that wasn't that big, oh, well, that was big, like, and that's, again, we're judging, and we're, placing our own opinions on that. Well, that she should be fine. She shouldn't be triggered by that, or he should be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
That should be, but you don't know how it affected them, right? Where they
Yeah.
were in their life at that time. So I try to be cognizant of all of those things, because I guess, helping people out of the wilderness of their journeys is kind of, I guess, what I say, my forte and my expertise area. And I think you can't judge people to do that. That doesn't mean I'm not human. I could see somebody else,
Yeah, of course. Of
like,
course.
what the
Yeah.
hell is that? But always being able, right? I don't always see it through the better lens initially, but I
Mhm.
check myself, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
I say,
Yeah.
okay, try to see this through a different lens.
We're not gonna get it right all the time.
No, never, never, never. But the
Yeah.
ability to know that is,
Yeah.
that we're not going to and
Absolutely.
assess ourselves, is where it's at.
Absolutely. I mean, I say as a coach, listen, I don't get it right all the time. But my strength is my curiosity to keep learning and keep assessing myself and seeing where I can improve.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Tia, wrapping up, is there anything that you want to share or mention, anything at all, whether it's your website or anything you have coming up that you want to share here?
Sure. Like I think you said earlier, I write for, well, I'm a ghostwriter and I write for some of the bigger name motherhood forums on social media that you'll see. We have a book, Her View from Home. It's written, the author is Leslie Means, but what it is kind of like a modern day chicken soup for the soul.
Yeah.
So it has quite a few essays in there from moms like me. And I would love if everybody picked up a copy on April 18th. It'll hit bookshelves and it's called So God Made a Mother. And they can also visit me on ttalkswithtia.com and on any of my social media platforms by the same. I'm currently rolling over from just a blog post. I have my hand in a lot of projects to taking on clients. I love doing that. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, they'll find my contact information on any of those forums.
Yeah, and I'll share all that when I post this on my social media. So if anybody has any questions or wants to reach out, they'll have the information.
Yes, that sounds great. Ooh, sorry, I hope
All
you
right,
didn't
Tia.
get that.
Thank you for sitting down for this conversation. Again, the book was Daring Greatly: How the Courage to Be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead. Tia, thank you so
Yes.
much for your time. It
Yeah.
was awesome catching up.
John, it was so great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And hopefully we talk again soon.
Flash from the past. Now, if there's
Yes.
anything that I might have missed, we're limited on time and there's so many questions that I could ask Tia. If you're curious about anything,
Sure.
please just reach out to me and let me know, and I'll let her know, see if she can answer any additional questions that may come up. In the
I would love to.
meantime, absolutely. No, and I appreciate that so much. In the meantime, to anybody watching and listening, thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Take care, John.